Hey, this is Waylon from Swiftwood Bows. Today I'm laying out a vine maple flatbow. The design I'm using is a slightly modified American Flatbow Design. It has more of a willow leaf shape with longer, thinner fades. From a functional standpoint though, it's pretty much the same thing. Even though I'm using vine maple here, this design is really perfectly fine for any typical whitewood flatbow style, like hickory or eastern hop hornbeam or such. To start with, I'm simply just drawing a line down the crown of the back, following any snakes in the wood. Be sure to stay on the crown and don't go off to one side or the other. When you're finished, go ahead and look down the length of the stave and make sure that it's really going down the top and not off to one side. Here's my finished center line for the bow. You can see how it's following the snakes of the wood, going right down the top of the crown. Alright, now I'm going to measure to find the center of the stave. These high reflex vine maple staves are a joy to work with from the very beginning, as you can see. And I'll just mark a line right there where the center is. I mark this line with a C so I can remember that this is the true center. You'll see why in a second. Next, I measure out the handle section. Typical flatbow handle is 4 inches. At this point I decide which side is going to be the top limb and which side is going to be the bottom limb. On this bow I'm going to make the top limb 1 inch longer than the bottom limb. I do this by shifting the ruler a half an inch towards the bottom limb, and then I mark off 4 inches. Then I mark the center of the handle, which is different than the center of the bow. I'm going to start laying out the fades here next. First I measure 2 inches out from the end of the handle on each side. The handle's going to be 1 inch wide at each end. To make a bulbous handle, I'll measure it 1 1/4 inch in the middle. The final dimensions of my handle will be a fair bit smaller and more refined than this, but this will give me a basic shape to work with. Now it's time to play connect the dots, and that will give me my handle shape. Alright, my fades are going to be a little bit funky on this willow leaf design. A normal American flatbow design like this, the bow would reach its full width at about 2 inches. I'm only measuring out to 1.5 inches width at 2-inch fades. That's not going to be the full width of my bow. I'll extend that out a little bit past these fades here in a minute. You'll see how I do that. But for now, what I'm doing here is making the start of my fades, which are 2 inches long and 1.5 inches wide. Now I'm going to extend the fade out to the full width. I measure 1 more inch out along the length of the bow and mark it. I'm going to make it 2 inches wide at this point. And then I connect my lines. And there's my full fade. Now I use my tape measure to find the center of the limb. I measure from the end of the handle out to the tip of the bow and mark where the center is. I'm just fixing my line here a little bit. I'm going to add a little nuance here that's more for appearance than anything else to kind of enhance the willow leaf shape of the limb. I marked the halfway point to the halfway point, so I guess that would be the quarter of the limb. I'm going to mark it 2¼ inches here in the middle of this wider section of the limb to make it flare out a little bit. Now I'm going to just connect the dots here from my 2 inches at the fades to the 2¼ at the widest point here. Here at mid-limb, I'm going to mark the width at 2 inches again. And connect the dots there from 2¼ inches down to 2 inches at mid-limb. I realized right here that I didn't exactly like my center line, so I'm going to alter it a little bit. Now I'm measuring the width of my tips at 1/2 inch. When I'm finished, the tips will be quite a bit narrower than that, but this will be a good start for me when I'm roughing out the bow. The outer half of the limb is just a straight taper from 2 inches all the way down to the 1/2 inch. I'm just kind of eyeballing the ruler here and making a straight line. If you do a careful job at this stage when you're designing the bow and laying it out, you're going to save yourself a lot of hassle and grief later on. Here's the layout of the bow all finished up, ready to start with the hatchet work. The dimensions of the handle area and the tips will look quite a bit different when I'm finished with the bow, but the working limbs will stay pretty true to this design. Thank you for watching, and I hope this is helpful when you're designing your next bow.